A very good afternoon to all of you. I am Ella, welcoming you all on behalf of Solar Quarter and the First View Group to the launch of the Solar Week Philippines 2025. This exclusive launch webinar for Solar Week Philippines 2025 sets the stage for a deeper industry dialogue, bringing together policymakers, thought leaders, technology innovators, and investors to examine the key drivers shaping Philippines' solar future. About the Solar Week Philippines. So we are delighted to share that Solar Quarter, is hosting the third edition of the Solar Week Philippines 2025 on September 18th, 2025 at the Sheraton Manila Bay, Philippines. The Solar Week Philippines 2025 returns for its third edition and is set to be bigger and more impactful than ever as the country accelerates towards its ambitious target of 50% renewable energy by 2040. This event serves as a premier platform for industry leaders to connect, collaborate, and drive innovation in the solar and storage sectors. To give you a glimpse of what's in store, let's take a look at the official teaser of the Solar Week Philippines. May I now request my team to kindly play the video. Thank you, team. That was an exciting preview of what's to come. So, what to expect in this session today? In the lead up to the third edition of the Solar Week Philippines 2025, today's session offers strategic insights on how policy, finance, and technology are coming together to drive Philippines' solar and storage future, with discussions on regulatory support, innovative financing, and emerging technologies shaping the sector. Just a quick announcement here. Attendees are encouraged to post their questions in the Q&A box and our speakers will address them at the end of the panel discussion. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce our esteemed panel of speakers. We have with us Mr. Junrei Castro, Managing Director of Bevari, Mr. Morris Zhao, Group CEO and co-founder of Bird Renewables, Mr. Vince Heo, Director S&P Global, Ms. Modini Yantrapati, Principal from AFRI. Leading this discussion is our moderator, Mr. Dennis Quintero, Partner, Cusimbing Torres Law Office, member firm of Baker and McKinsey International. Over to you, Mr. Quintero.
Many thanks, Ala, and welcome to all our participants in today's webinar and panel discussion. Our topic will be accelerating the Philippines' energy transition, synergies between policy, finance, and technology. Ala has introduced our distinguished panel members. Now, I would like to request each of them for a brief introduction of their companies as well as their projects and operations in the Philippines and in the region. If I can request Junrei to start.
Thank you, Dennis. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Junrei. I am with BioRE. So BioRE is a renewable energy company with presence in different parts of the world. Specifically in the Philippines, we are mainly focused on the distribution business, though we have also other arm of business in other countries focused on project development. So We have been operational for more than 20 years now as a business, and building that capacity. And I'm happy to share the experience, the knowledge that we have built over the past few years in this 1 hour panelist. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shinrei. And I'd like to request Maurice for a brief introduction on Verde Renewables.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Hi, everyone. My name is Morris. I'm the co-founder and group CEO of Verde Renewables. We are a portfolio company of I Squared Capital, a US-based private equity firm managing $45 billion of assets globally, focusing on energy and infra. So Verde Renewables is a portfolio company of I Squared that focuses on DER opportunities within the Southeast Asia region, now having presence in the Philippines and also Thailand. Even though we haven't been in the market for very long, the company has actually was only incorporated back in 2022. However, we have actually grown quite a significant presence within the region. Towards the end of 2025, we should be owning and operating approximately 150 megawatts of rooftop solar across both Thailand and also Philippines. And we've got a mandate to deploy close to $500 million within the Southeast Asia region through our funding parent, I Squared Capital. So happy to see familiar faces at today's panel, and looking forward to a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Many thanks, Maurice. I now would like to request Vince to describe S&P Global's activities in the Philippines and in the region.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. So my name is Vince. I'm from S&P Global Commodity Insights, covering power and renewable market research. We do provide our clients with market intelligence information, and one of our main job is actually to make a forecast on power supply and demand, power price, LCOE of the different technologies, etc. So yeah, happy to have a discussion with a lot of distinguished panelists here. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince. And last but not the least, I'd like to request Modini of Afrai to share with us their business and operations here in the Philippines and in the region.
Thanks, Dennis. Hello, everyone. I'm Modini. I'm a principal consultant with AFRI, and in the sector of energy storage and hybrid solutions. And AFRI is a global engineering, design, and advisory company. And we do have about 18,000 experts all over the world, and we have delivered more than in 50 countries with the solar, wind, and battery projects. And so there are also other business lines like we have in the engineering, design, digitalization, and advisory. And in Philippines, we do offer EPC design, front-end engineering design, and also market services within the region. Back to you, Dennis. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Modini. We have an excellent mix of the various players in the energy sector, and we're very excited for the panel discussion proper, which we will now start. This first question I'd like to address to Junrei and Maurice. How can the Philippines Energy Plan and National Renewable Energy Program be better aligned to drive solar and storage execution? Maybe I'll request Junrei to comment first.
Sure. Thank you, Dennis. Firstly, NREP provides a very strategic direction in terms of the renewable energy policy in the Philippines. On the other hand, we also see that it requires deeper alignment between national planning and considering the real world constraints. First, we consider the ground realities, right? The solar and storage are highly sensitive to interconnection feasibility. We've experienced in the past where you invest in a land permit only to discover later on that there are capacity constraints at the nearest substation, which are already saturated or not scheduled for upgrades. So that creates constraints sometimes. Maybe an actionable part of it would be for DOE and NGCP to consider co-publishing a renewable energy zoning maps, which would then project hosting capacities in terms of transmission upgrades, and the plan in terms of transmission lines. Secondly, we also see that there is a need for a central coordinating body that would integrate different departments within the government, like DNR, the Department of Agrarian Reform, to have a unified dashboard. I think the government is working towards this as well, which would really help in terms of improving confidence of the investors. Uh, Maybe to add as well is the engagement with the private sector must be institutionalized. Reason is there seems to be lacking information sometimes in terms of grid progress, um, uh, auction performance, for example, and the permitting cycles. This also creates sometimes confusion as when you're in the position of a developer or an EPC who's working on a project. So maybe some of those points are critical to be considered. Also to add, lastly, is the storage deployment goals. BESS initiative specific should be linked to the policy as well. And that's maybe an upgrade that we can see moving ahead in terms of NREP.
Thank you, Junray. I think that's a very good point about the suggestion to have a zoning map. So that would be, I believe, the Department of Energy in collaboration with other departments of government, because then there may be various contracts, tenure instruments within the same parcel, within the same land area, and it's important for the project proponent to know everything that's what are the rights that are already existing even before the project is started.
Yeah.
And I'd also like to ask Maurice about his views on this question. Maurice?
Yes, thank you very much. So I do echo some of John Ray's points. So in order to sort of address these questions, how the PP and the NREP can be better aligned to drive solar and storage execution, I would like to basically tackle this in basically under 5 levers. I guess targets. That's probably one sector. Market design, grid permitting, finance, and governance. So just to give you a few examples. So if we and the first point is actually the targets that we're actually setting under the PP and NREP. So if you look at the PP, the PP 2022 to 2040, it expresses its goal as a percentage, right? So 35% renewable energy by 2030 or 50% by 2040. This is actually quite inconsistent with NREP's capacity number, where NREP has basically specific prescribed capacity for solar and wind by 2040. And I think the reason why it actually matters is because banks like lenders, NGCP, LGUs, size substations, and also developers, we look at projects based on capacity nameplate rated rather than a percentage, right? So this is probably like a quick fix to actually align some of the targets that's actually prescribed in the 2 plans. So that's just one example under the target. There's a few examples when I actually went through the two policies. Another example could be that actually talking about the market design, right? So say for example, under the market design, two examples where I believe it could be better aligned and improved. One is the auxiliary services market reform, right? If we could fast track ERC's rule so that battery actually qualifies as a regulation and contingency reserve, then this would actually open up a much bigger acceleration for energy storage, which then sort of encourages more intermittent generation such as solar and wind to actually come online. Another market design sort of I guess alignment could be the RPS and the time of day slices, right? Because right now the annual RPS escalation, which is approximately, I think from memory, a little shy of 3%, only, doesn't deal with basically peak and off peak. So, if we can actually have that better aligned and have, I guess alignment where, DUs must buy, say, for example, daytime solar and, evening stored energy, then this would actually accelerate the adoption of energy storage, during times where the overcapacity solar needs to be sort of stored. So that's like another, that's under the market design. Grid permitting, I think John Ray touched upon it just then. So just one example is, like say for example, we've under the DOE, the EVOS system still treats the BESS as a generation. So if the EVOS IR can be amended so that energy storage system follows the same, amend the EVOS IR so that standalone ESS follows the same single window. Like say, for example, the 30 business day clock granted to solar and wind. This would actually improve a lot more standalone solar, to come online in the future. So that's probably around the grid and permitting. Another, I guess, just some of the misalignments or better alignments that should be done under the PEP and NREP. So that's just sort of my 2 cents. I've actually got a few more points that I can actually talk about. Say for example, another point is around the financing, right? So, Bode Renewables being a 100% foreign-owned entity, we know that since there's been foreign ownership of REs in the Philippines has been allowed since the end of 2022. But this would actually it would actually be a lot more, I guess, helpful if this 100% foreign ownership allowance for RE was actually in the PEP, right? So it's in the PEP now, so it's actually not treated as just a policy experiment. So I guess, but then again, the market is also already moving towards a much more foreign investor-friendly market. But this was just one example under the PEP where it could actually be better aligned. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurice, for those very specific suggestions. We'll now move on to our next question, which I'd like to address to Vince. Vince, what do you see as the impact of the Green Energy Auction Program and the RPS in accelerating RE deployment, and how do you think they can be improved?
Thanks, Dennis. I think like both channels actually play an important role in deploying renewables. For the RPS, I think in particular, because for the distribution companies or retailers, they all also need substantial amount of supply as a base load or mid-merit, also from renewables. So in terms of solar plus battery storage, that's important offtake channels, as we've seen in some of the large-scale projects by Terra Solar, for instance, and also I think Morocco has some plans to even open another tender for mid-merit renewable energy tender later this year. So that's for the RPS, I think that's quite an important role to play. But for green energy auction, I think has become one of the main drivers in terms of renewable energy market in the Philippines. When we talk to the developers or the lenders, I think almost all of them actually mention JEP as the main offtake channels, and they are looking into like the upcoming auctions, the JEP 4, and for the offshore wind players, the fifth round. I think there are some of the international players looking into that channel. In particular, because I think we are talking about solar plus BESS today. So I think it's important to see how the introduction of PV plus BESS plays out from the fourth auction this year. I think the gear price has reflected some of the industry concern on the ceiling price. So we'll hopefully see some good results from it. I think going forward, like which area do we see some improvement? I think one of the maybe questions or concerns especially for the international players is that they basically need some more clarity in terms of the capacity auction, right? So I think Maurice also just mentioned a good point about the need for capacity-based target, right? But if you have a capacity-based target in the mid to long term, you will have more visibility in terms of how much capacity will be auctioned through JAB, right? So then the companies will also have more room to plan for which slot they want to enter, etc. So for now, I think the industry is excited because the auction capacity is large enough. But I think like Philippines also has to think about that the country should not follow the boom and bust cycle as we've seen in some other markets like in Vietnam. So that's something maybe the Philippines needs in order to continue this momentum.
Thanks, Vince. Can I ask, you mentioned about the experience in Vietnam. Are there lessons that Philippines can learn from the Vietnam experience, and perhaps we can avoid?
Well, I think there are many issues currently facing in Vietnam. I think the most important thing is to have better planning in terms of supply and demand, because obviously the issues with oversupply back in 2020 still have some impact in terms of curtailment in the southern region of Vietnam. And then we have this issue of reversing the FIT, etc., right? But I think that's something that the Philippines needs to learn. And when they actually allocate the solar, wind, battery storage in different regions, I think they should have a better planning in advance so that you don't actually see serious maybe oversupply or curtailment issues in the near future.
Thank you, Vince. We've heard suggestions from John Ray and Maurice on possible policy reforms. In your view, Vince, in addition to what you discussed about GIAP and the RPS, what do you think could be other policy reforms that can boost investor confidence in solar and BSS?
Yeah, I'll maybe just make a quick point. I think for investors in general, I think we're going to talk about bankability issue as well. So put aside the bankability things. I think for most of the players, one probably major bottleneck which the developers and also the lenders are facing is more in terms of the pre-construction phase. Like the development still takes too much time. In the Philippines, grid connection is still an issue. I think there has been some improvement in terms of the time needed for getting approval in terms of the system impact study. Because previously we heard it took about 1.5 years up to 2 years back in like 3 years ago. I heard that approval time has shortened a little bit, but alongside this improvement in the system impact study, I think there's also a need to streamline the permitting process, especially coordinating different, regulatory bodies, local government, etc. Because that part is still a big question mark for especially for a lot of new players, right? Because in the Philippines, you have a few large players, domestic players, incumbents who have a very close ties with the government, also with the banks. They pretty much actually have a big role in the market. But in order for the Philippine market to even scale up in the future, I think there should be some more streamlined permitting process so that the new players can also enter this market, working with the international lenders, for instance. And that's, I think, what is needed in the Philippines.
Thank you. Thank you, Vince. While we're on the topic of financing, I'd like to ask Maurice this next question. What do you think would be the role that blended finance, green bonds, and carbon markets can play in funding RE projects?
Yep. Thank you very much, Dennis. Um, from my experience, so largely, I'm actually from Sydney, Australia, but now permanently based in Manila. So in Australia, we've actually seen a fairly significant uptake of renewables over the past decade and a half. And coming on to the topic of blended finance, that actually helped many of the, I would say, borderline mature technology to take off the ground. In my understanding, blended finance is where concessional capital or public money, comes and takes the first loss or higher risk position than that of commercial lenders, right? So, if we look at Australia, back in 2014, 2015, solar PV was quite a novel technology, and many of the commercial lenders, were very enthusiastic to actually come in and do project finance for solar, but because of their risk appetite, and their experience, it's very hard for them to actually come in, because local lenders in Australia just didn't have the experience, right? Unlike back then in 2014, lenders in Europe, whether that be SocGen, whether that be NordLB, German banks, they had a lot more experience. So at the time, the Australian federal government actually had set up a body entity called the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. So that was actually a federal government owned body, which basically tapped into the federal government's treasury. So it was actually part of the Australian budget. And what the Clean Energy Finance Corporation does is that it actually helps projects get off the ground where there is basically little to no appetite from commercial lenders, right? So, typically what they do is, they take on subordinated debt positions, they do co-equity investments, they do interest rate buy downs. They also provide relative hedges for finances where the market is not, comfortable with. So that is something that I guess in the Philippines we do have, some of the more of the international multilateral lenders in the market doing something like that. Say for example ADB, IFC. They've been quite active in the Philippines market. I guess from these, international policy driven. Me personally, I'm not aware whether or not, I think some of the maybe government-owned banks, policy-driven banks in the Philippines, like, Land Development Bank, or, they can actually really play a role, with the commercial lenders, such as your, BDOs of the world, to be able to actually come in and do, and help accelerate renewable energy projects, not necessarily the ones that which everybody's already very familiar with, like say for example a standalone solar or a standalone wind. A lot of the commercial lenders are very familiar with, but what about, integrated resource, right? Integrated, solar plus battery, or a standalone battery that's actually playing in the merchant market, with stacked revenue. So that is something that I believe that a lot of the commercial lenders are probably not as familiar with, and that's where I guess these concessional public money can come in and take sort of the first tranche to get the market more familiar. And with blended finance, why it matters is because it actually pushes down the weighted average cost of capital, right? Because as we all know, financiers, it's all about risk and reward. If the risk is higher, the margin they're going to ask is going to be higher. If it's a lower risk, they're going to ask for a lower risk margin. So I think pushing down the WACC will also help with the improved LCOE. So that's one. Second of all is, with blended finance, it will also help raising long-term tenor finance, right? So rather than a 5 years or a 10 years mini perm, if there is basically that cushion there, more of the commercial banks are willing to sort of come in and say, okay, I'll lend 15 years, 20 years on a long-term basis, which gives the sponsor, of that asset a lot more certainty in terms of debt, and they don't really have to, take into debt refi or debt refi risk in the future. And also, this blended finance can also be coupled with green bonds. I guess green, it can be coupled with pre-sales of green bonds, right? Green bonds actually apparently in the Philippines is not something new. I believe, when I did just a bit of a research, one of the, the leading, renewable energy developer, ASEN, right? They've been basically issuing green bonds in the past. So green bond really helps driving down the cost, because there is a premium, there is I guess a premium for green bond. And typically what we've seen in the market is around about, I would say, 10 to 15 basis points in recent times. So green bond is definitely something, although The bond market typically is more catered for larger players. So, if you've got already a very significant asset base, that would actually be a very suitable instrument for these sponsors to drive down the cost of capital, to improve either the profitability or lower the LCOE. But we have actually seen in other markets such as the US, let's say, for example, the rooftop market, right? We've seen in the past leading rooftop solar players being able to actually issue green bonds, to the private market, let's say $50 million at a time. So rather than a tranche of 200, you're basically seeing smaller tranches. So I do believe that as the market in the Philippines become more mature, you will see, let's say, private, even potentially mom and dads, like retail investors saying, look, rather than me sort of buying, I guess, debentures or bonds from listed companies, why don't I buy a chunk of a green bond from a project that's actually in my neighborhood, right? So we actually have seen that Australia as well, like, community owned assets, 5 megawatts, 10 megawatts, and then having that sort of asset issue a securitization to the residents within that area, right? So they can actually benefit not only from the green energy, but also benefit from the economic output of that asset within their community. So, and then third of all is a carbon market. Honestly speaking, I don't think I'm actually in a position to comment on the carbon market, because Australia was going to go through a carbon credits market, but that did not reach bipartisan. So unfortunately, till date, Australia, we don't actually have a carbon market as per se. So that's probably my 2 cents on the first two topics.
Many thanks, Maurice. In the Philippines, we now have a sovereign wealth fund called the Maharlika Investment Fund, and they made a commitment to invest in sustainable energy and infrastructure. They already made some initial investments, I'm sure everyone has read in the reports. In terms of government banks, as you mentioned, Land Bank is pretty aggressive in lending. They provide financing to merchant projects, and also they have a more lenient debt to equity requirement for borrowers. Okay, let's move on to our next question, and I'd like to address this to Modini. How critical do you think is BSS in off-grid and island areas, and what support is needed for a scale up?
Sure. Thanks, Dennis. And the discussion has been going well, and I think now we have to focus on the off-grid side of the things. Philippines is, of course, is an archipelago nation. We have thousands of islands everywhere, and then there are microgrids, and also we have touched upon the community-based resources. One of the things that BESS is actually a very good source is where previously the diesel generators have already been deployed as part of backup power, and then batteries have taken that position in 1 megawatt to 10 megawatt of scale in certain areas and communities, so that it helps with the backup power if there is any unfortunate event or blackouts that we are seeing across due to various reasons. So that's one way where how batteries have come into the energy mix, and then have been very supporting with respect to any of the frequency regulation, voltage support, or as a very backup power. And one of the applications in off-grid scenarios, what I have seen in other markets like in Thailand, was also when battery energy storage system could be used as a transmission deferral, in the sense that when there has to be electricity that needs to be passed from one certain island to another certain area by sub sea cables or something, and then batteries actually have made sure that they could store energy and then dispatch when needed. And that way it was also very easy to easily dispatch your energy when they are in the off-grid mode. And it's it has been a proven technology or a proven resource in other markets, and that's something in Philippines also we need to consider when we have to talk more on the geographical or the climatic changes that we are seeing currently. And what support would be needed is, I think, the access to financing mechanisms in the community scale. That's very important. I mean, this could come as a private investment or a public-private investments, and that's really important in uplifting the communities with the energy security and the resilience that they would need for their daily purposes.
Thanks, Madi. What are you seeing in terms of the cost of BESS generally, Modini? Is it coming down significantly already?
Yeah, I mean, if we talk about lithium-ion based batteries, battery technology, as the prices have been, I mean, when I started looking at a decade ago and now, the prices have come down very drastically and significantly. And of course, during the COVID time, we did have some of the supply chain challenges, and the prices are coming down, and there are more cells that are getting packed into the containers. So the containers which were previously giving certain megawatt hour actually have increased, and then they're getting more modular and scalable in terms of that. And there's a lot of innovations and energy mechanisms and also technology developments that has been going in reducing the prices. But of course they are not as competitive as I mean, solar by themselves, because solar panels are also decreasing in the material costs. So I think as an integrated solution, it would be really easy to look, if we have to look the batteries as more of a decarbonization lever. I mean, taking a holistic view on how they can actually reduce the emissions that might cause some ecological imbalances in the communities and in the off-grid scenarios.
Thank you, Madini. So this is a follow-up question. This is a question that I'd like to pose to Modini and to Vince as well. Also relating to financing. How are financiers assessing the bankability of solar plus storage in the Philippine context from your experience?
Yeah, I think I can talk more on a technology side of the things. I mean, when the technology and the batteries were very new in the market, of course, there has been a lot of concerns around the thermal runaway conditions and the insurances around the fire risk. The batteries are coming, but I think with the development and the innovations and more larger scale, battery technologies that are being deployed. I mean, the conversation won't be complete if I don't touch upon Terra Solar project, which is happening right now in Philippines with the solar and the storage. So, I mean, there were, of course, a lot of concerns from the financiers and the developer with respect to, how, in the sense of how bankable is this technology, as in, will it be able to be deployed in in the time that has been considered, and is there such short the supply chain which can actually render to the gigawatt hours of batteries? But I think since it is from very well-known brands or well-known manufacturers in terms of technology components, I think things are getting okay. But we are also seeing a lot of technology advancements that are moving away from lithium-ion battery, and then if solar has to be coupled with flow batteries or anything else, that's when the cost effectiveness and also the scalability of the deployment comes into picture, and this needs to be assessed in a very detailed manner. But currently, if I have to talk about how technology wise, I think investors are getting comfortable, but again, I mean, they do have their own concerns with respect to how long has this project will run. I mean, and how about the battery degradations? Are they really up to the data sheet specifications that has been given, or are they actually kind of degrading much faster than expected? So these kind of concerns and the warranties and the guarantees, which are actually backed up in the contracts, will be honored or not. So these are the concerns in some of the battery projects that I'm actually dealing with a lot of investors and developers.
Thanks, Malini. What type of battery or battery chemistry are you seeing as the more dominant right now? And do vendors have a preference towards NCM or maybe LFP or some other type of chemistry?
Yeah, I think most dominant and the cost-effective solution currently is LFP batteries, lithium phosphate, ion lithium phosphate batteries, because like I mentioned, I think there has been a technological developments, and we are also seeing that the LFP batteries are getting deployed in EV sector as well. Of course, EV started more on the NMC batteries due to the energy density and the power requirements, but LFPs have been known with respect to, and also they're more resilient in terms of the fire, thermal runaway conditions, and they're getting more deployed in both storage, stationary storage, as well as the EV kind of applications. And I think that's also one of the good things, because the costs are coming down because of more rapid deployments that's happening everywhere around the battery technology.
Okay, thank you, Madini. And Vince, can we get your thoughts as well on this?
Yeah, probably more on the commercial perspective, right? So in addition to the technology side, So I think in general, the lenders feel comfortable funding solar or wind project in the Philippines, especially through the JEB, because JEB basically offers the offtake by the state-owned transco. So there's not a big concern on the offtaker side, and also 20-year fixed price PPA, and there's no a major issue in terms of the curtailment at the moment yet. So they don't actually see a huge, bankability issues as they see in some of the other markets in the Southeast Asia. I think more in terms of the auction design, which the Philippines can actually think about, is the time for the commercial operation. So for instance, the GF4, the slot that it offers goes out to 2029. So when it comes to the solar, and especially with the solar plus BESS, whether the cost of these projects around 2028 to 2029 can still meet the ceiling price requirement, right? Because we've seen in the past that overall the cost has come down, but when the market actually changes, there is also possibility that some of the supply chain issues can actually drive up the cost. This would be probably more of a problem for the offshore wind, which we've seen in other markets, but same for the PV plus BESS. So something to think about. Probably you can actually allocate smaller, capacity and more frequent, opening of the auction so that you have more clarity in terms of the timing of the project coming online. So probably that's one thing to consider in terms of improving the bankability in the future. Secondly, I think because we are talking about BESS, so the role of PV plus BESS in joining potentially participating in the Western market. So that would be probably an important revenue stream as it comes online. But the problem with the Western market is that you actually see a lot of volatility. So we've seen a lot of time intervals that actually the power price actually hit zero. But also at the same time in the first quarter, we've seen coal power plants going, uh, forced outage and then price actually peaking. So basically they have to introduce the price cap in order to ease the power prices. So in terms of the predictability of the Western price is something that is still very hard to predict because of the unique feature of the Western market, where a lot of participants actually has no spot exposure, so their contract arrangement is actually outside of the Western market, right? So there's some, I think, revenue stream that's hard to predict when it comes to PV plus BESS in the Western market perspective.
Thank you, Vince. And I'd like to ask Modini, we're on the matter of technology. What do you think are the technologies that are most suited for the Philippines' geography and climate challenges?
Yeah, I think when we have to talk about solar and batteries, on that note, of course, like I mentioned, solar industry is also going through its own technology developments, and bifacial solar panels have proven, probably for countries, tropical climates like Philippines, that could yield more efficiency than expected or any other thing. So that's one thing on the solar side. And for the battery technologies, lithium-ion battery is good and well known for up to 4 hours or probably 6 hours. And when we have to talk about more longer duration, and lithium ion batteries have probably not yet been there. And there are other markets which are looking into lithium ion batteries playing in the market for more than 4 hours or 6 hours. But then I think in Philippines, we also have hydropower, which is already deployed, and the mighty power is there in most of the islandic regions here. One more technology probably that can be explored, but of course cost effective wise it may not stand currently, is on the fuel cells. And I'm not sure how far we can look at it in the Philippines context, but I think when it comes to technological challenges from a market or a climate change perspective, is also designing your solar panels and the battery containers that are typhoon resistant and also have higher wind resilience than before. So these are some of the technologies I could think at this moment that Philippines could go forward. And I'm also seeing with a lot of developers asking more questions about the technology and the sufficiency in terms of how this design could actually withstand some of the challenges that Philippines geography or the climate may throw. Yeah.
Thank you, Madini. And I'd like to ask this question, address this question to John Ray. How
Yeah.
are OEMs and developers addressing off-grid needs and resilience in system design?
Specific to off-grid and island setting, engineering resilience is very critical. As you could already see now, we're going through a series of typhoons. So that's really critical in terms of considering designs and deployments of projects. That includes material selection, including the operating model as well, the OEMs. We've seen now several projects taking into as what Madini mentioned, containerized microgrid solutions. So these solutions integrate battery energy storage and also have diesel backups in a very compact and modular design. So these are particularly valuable in islands where logistics are challenging. And sometimes you design, but you don't consider the realistic approach in terms of deployment. So we're working on few projects at the moment. Um, uh, where we have considered a pre-integration. We also test the system before we deploy them, even on site, to make sure everything works. Because the moment you install them, it's going to be very difficult to change and replace them. So we uh, we also design a system where it's corrosion resistant. That's really critical because most of these islands are very close to the sea, and they're very prone to such failures. Um, some of the technologies we have put together now includes smart technology. So we've considered AI. It's really critical in terms of design for us, because for this island, remote monitoring, for example, is very critical. We need to also know what's the status. Of course, we could deploy people on site, but it's gonna be very limited. We need to make sure we could troubleshoot systems remotely as needed, where we also have fault detection on the systems. So these are critical considerations because most of the developers investing on such technology are looking as well on how to ensure continuous operation, especially when you're operating a microgrid system and there's a typhoon coming, you're almost at the edge of your seat every day because surge storms could happen. So you always have to call the people on the ground to make sure everything is on a good position.
Thanks, Junrei. How about the challenge in some areas is that they're more above average dust. Is there also technology to dust?
Dust.
Yes. Is there
Yes.
also a technology being developed to address that?
So there are solutions available to this where you specific to inverters. It's we call it like a automated cleaning where you don't necessarily need to be there. So there's a way for you to ensure that dust are removed. For panels specifically, then the best way is really to ensure that you design the system with the right slope and also making sure you select the right product with the right AR coating, and we regularly clean as well as needed.
Okay. Thanks, Junrei. Okay. For our next question, I'd like to this is a follow-up question to JC, and I'd also like to get Morris's view on this. What new business models are emerging to support scalable and competent RE deployment? Maybe John Ray first.
We're seeing rapid innovation in business models that break down barriers in terms of RE adoption. First, we see power as service, the PASS models. It's gaining attraction, especially in rooftop space where customers avoid capex and signing long-term service agreements, paying only for energy used. So this makes solar plus BESS accessible to SMEs. Also, we've seen quite a bit of logistics providers, cold storage operators who are going into this model. Another model gaining interest is the virtual power plant, where small scale solar and storage units are aggregated and managed centrally to provide grid services. This unlocks new revenue streams such as frequency regulation, demand response. Um, uh, so with ERC and NGCP support, I believe we can enable such more businesses to go this way. There's also an advent of community solar, especially in dense cities where um rural cooperatives have very limited space, so a share in offsite solar farm and energy credits. That's something that we are seeing. This model is ideal for renters, for schools, for buildings with shaded roofs. So where the capacity is limited and virtual net metering could be allowed, this could dramatically also increase business for RE. Um, Bundling smaller solar projects as well is something that we've seen. Like a single financiable portfolio supported by a pool of performance and insurance. This reduces transaction cost and improves bankability for institutional investors. So I'm sure Morris probably has more experience on this and could talk in a much deeper level compared to me. So I'll hand it over to him.
No, I was just gonna say, genre, you've probably covered everything that I was gonna talk about except one. So yeah. So I think genre, you've said it really well. Like all of these are definitely emerging business models. One business model I would like to probably touch on, which I believe is gaining a lot of attraction, starting to gain a lot of traction in the Philippines, which is very popular overseas, is virtual corporate PPAs, right? So, some people may have heard of it, some people may not have heard of it, right? So um, uh, 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 I guess Philippines, there's a very big untapped market for virtual PPAs, and the reason for that is that Philippines has a WESM, right, a pool price, which most other Southeast Asian countries don't have. Thailand doesn't have that, Vietnam doesn't have that, Indonesia doesn't have that. So I think because the Philippines national electricity market WESM was I guess built largely in reference to the Australian national electricity market. I can probably share a bit of experience in Australia, which I see is going to get a lot of attraction in the Philippines. So say for example, because Birday, when we started off in the Philippines, our sort of value is that we're basically client centric, right? So, the first example genre was actually talking about is power as a service. We go out to clients and try to understand their power needs, understand their available real estate, and we'll try to size a system which actually caters for their needs and enter into a long-term offtake, whether that be 10 years or 20 years, for on-site power generation. But sometimes we come across situations where, a client who has a very high ESG mandate would like to maximize their on-site generation where possible. However, the real estate that they have, whether that be, the rooftop or the available ground mount, is not sufficient to put any more solar or energy storage. So what that means is that we'll have to basically go off-site or virtual PPA. So the concept of a virtual PPA is where a generator, whether connected to the DU or the transmission network, settle its power directly with WESM, right? So we all know WESM has a spot market price. It fluctuates every periodic. Price is very volatile up and down. So many of the like
I think we lost Morris. Ala will wait for Morris to rejoin us. I'm sure he'll be rejoining us shortly.
Yes, so in the meantime, we can go ahead with the discussion while he must have faced some technical issues. So as soon as he
Okay.
comes back, I'll just intimate you.
Yes. Okay. We'll revert to Morris
Apologies,
when we resume.
everyone. Yes, there was a technical glitch. Yes, just when I was actually getting to the pointy end, right? So uh, so in the event, so the generator would actually, because investors for generators like solar and wind, we typically want stable, revenue certainty, right? We don't want the volatility and the fluctuation in the market. So we were basically, but we would settle the power with WESM. And then let's say, for example, there's corporate, so long as the corporate is actually within that corporate doesn't actually have to be within the vicinity of where that, solar farm is actually connected, right? So, it could be a data center, it could be, say, for example, I'm not saying it is, but let's say, for example, using an example like IKEA, right? IKEA in Pasai, they want to go green, they want to put solar on their rooftop, but perhaps there's actually limitations where they can't, hence therefore, they're looking for solutions. So in that sense, the generator would actually enter into what we call a contract for difference. So that is a financial derivative. The contract for difference between the contract strike price and also the WESM settlement price. So virtually, and then what would happen is that because of all these generators, they're eligible for creation of REC. So for every one megawatt hour of green energy created, the generator would actually hand over the REC, to the off taker to prove that, that is green energy. So in that event, the physical power is actually not being traded, right? The generator could be basically somewhere within the Luzon Island up north, and then let's say client is actually in Metro Manila. They are virtually basically exchanging the power through through the WESM pool price, right? So where the spot price is actually higher than the strike price, the generator would then basically compensate the difference to the offtake. And where the strike price is actually, so where the spot price is actually lower than the strike price, sorry, the spot price is lower than the strike price, the offtake would basically make whole of the generator, making sure that each party is actually hedged for the long run. And we've actually seen this business model very, very successful in markets where there is actually a pool market, such as the UK, such as Australia, such as Texas, such as California, because that now allows a lot of corporates, wanting green energy, not necessarily the physical, but able to actually support new, accelerate and support new RE projects off the ground. Another point of corporate virtual PPA, or you can even basically bundle it with aggregated corporate virtual PPA, right? So there are a lot of SMEs out in the market who also wants to go green, right? But typically, when you actually build a solar farm, it's 20 megawatts, 30 megawatts, 50 megawatts, 100 megawatts, 200 megawatts. So you could potentially, work with an aggregator in the market and aggregate basically the SME's volume, right? Maybe having a minimum volume block of, let's say, 5 megawatt as a block, and you'll probably aggregate, let's say, 500 kilowatts of customers at one time. So these financial instruments or financial instruments, financial derivatives, I believe, is going to be an emerging form of new business. I wouldn't say it's new business, but form of delivering green energy to off-takers who would want, to participate in the whole energy transition and to be able to actually support, new renewable energy generators such as wind, solar, battery, et cetera, to actually get off the ground. So probably that's a bit of where Birdie believes that, virtual corporate PPA or aggregated and virtual corporate PPA is going to take off in the Philippines.
Thank you, Morris. On virtual PPAs in the Australian model, Morris, is there actual delivery of electricity in the virtual PPA?
Yeah. So between the two contracted parties, they actually do not deliver the physicals, right? The physicals are basically delivered in the pool. So in the Philippines context, it's actually WESM. So the generator would actually be physically delivering its electricity or settling its electricity with WESM. And then the buyer through its RES. So you could basically team up with an RES that can actually do a sleeve contract, would actually do a full WESM pool price pass through. So for that portion of the electricity, that corporate is actually hedged for a very long time. So typically, for a solar in the Philippines, we're looking for a 20 years offtake. A lot of the corporates are willing to actually commit to a 20 years offtake, right? Because it's virtual now, right? So long as the business is around, it doesn't really matter where they are within sort of the Philippines electricity market. Yeah. So physically, the electricity is not delivered between party A and party B. It's actually settled against the pool price.
I see. I see.
Mm.
I think it's really a very promising area. In the Philippines, we have quite conservative rules on derivatives. As you may probably have heard. So I think it's for possible implementation of virtual PPAs here. I think we just have to review the applicable Philippine laws and regulations to, especially on derivatives. Because I think that there may be a need for the Philippines to revisit its derivative rules to keep up with the modern, developments.
Yep.
Yeah. One of the risk I see in VPPAs in Philippines, because it's typically a financial contract for difference, right? As you mentioned. So, the WESM price, if it falls below the strike price, as you say, the buyer is able to pay the difference. But in WESM, because it's very volatile environment, during the low demand or high renewable penetration, this creates financial risk. I'm not sure if something similar has been happening in Australia or somewhere else, and how do they address that?
Yeah. So in Australia, so the Australian market is as volatile, if not more volatile than WESM. So just to give you a bit of context, in Australia, the national electricity market has a cap price and a floor price, right? The cap can actually go as high as 14,500 Aussie dollar per megawatt hour, right? So the WESM price can shoot up to that point and it cannot go any higher. And the floor price is basically 1,000, a negative 1,000 Aussie dollar per megawatt hour. So given the high penetration of renewables in Australia, the volatility range is like 14, 15 times, right? So even within one day, we can actually see negative 1,000 all the way up to 14,500. So it's because the pool price is very volatile, hence therefore, in order for a financial derivative to work, you still need a physical hedge, right? And that solar farm, say for example, if I was the solar farm developer, my solar farm is that physical defense against my CFD, if
Understood.
that
Yeah.
makes sense, right? So a pure derivative is very risky, right? There's very high risk. The tool of a derivative is supposed to be used as managing risk rather than speculating on risk, right? So obviously, it's a double-edged sword. It can go both ways. But if a CFD contract is defended by a physical asset, solar
Yeah.
a farm, or let's say a battery, physical battery, then that risk is actually managed using that physical asset. So hence, therefore, the generator. So on the offtake side, that's more a credit risk, right? Whether the offtake can actually fulfill its obligation under the CFD, when the time comes to top up or whatnot. So that's more on the credit risk, and obviously there's credit risk on both sides to consider. Yes.
Thank you, Morris. A very interesting topic, and I think a topic worth 1 hour of discussion, I have to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, Morris and John Ray. We're almost out of time, but we have time for one more question before we go to the Q&A. And I'd like to address this to John Ray. How can policy, finance, and technology position the Philippines as a solar plus storage leader in ASEAN by 2030?
Well, if you look at the Philippines, it's, from hindsight, it seems like it has all the ingredients, right? From solar to storage, we definitely have demand. There are certain policies that's also there to support it. The geography suits the centralized system. The population, the economy is growing. So, number one, I think the policy must become proactive and integrated. We have policies, we just need to integrate and make sure that we are able to interconnect all these policies and ensure there's a clear plan in terms of execution as well. The finance, as we discussed in the topic as well, must evolve. There are a lot of catalytic tools that we could kind of pursue to ensure that we are able to de-risk projects. Interesting topics about green bond, blended finance, carbon credit monetization. This can dramatically reduce cost of capital. Um, Maybe a suggestion is also to launch a green guarantee fund that backs small scale or hybrid renewable energy projects, which enables the bank to lend more confidently to medium-sized businesses and cooperatives. So those could be a game changer. The technology must be democratized and localized in Philippines. That's really clear. Support for local assembly would also help enable the growth of renewable energy, not just on the policy base, but on the manufacturing side. There's a lot of opportunity for the Philippines to also be able to get more out of the renewable energy space and support the global trend, not just locally. Um, Finally, I think the energy transition, inclusive with the local government and cooperatives, the local developers should be empowered in terms of leading community solar and also for off-grid application. If we combine innovation and participation, we will not only meet targets, but maybe we can be one of the biggest players in the region, if not in the world, given the opportunity that lies in the Philippines.
Thanks so much, Ray. And over to Ala for the Q&A.
Thank you so much, sir. And a very special thanks to our panelists for engaging and for such an engaging, insightful discussion. Special thanks to, of course, Mr. Dennis for skillfully moderating the conversation. We truly appreciate the valuable perspective shared during the session today. So moving on to the Q&A sessions, we have received a few questions from our live audience. I'll just be reading them out here now. So one of the questions that we've received reads, regarding the boom and bust cycle for RE development, what can developers do better in the short term to avoid this? So Asa, I leave it up to you, whoever would want to take up this question.
Maybe I'll briefly answer it. So basically, what we've seen in other countries, developers are a little bit concentrated sometimes in terms of pipeline. So I would say maybe developers should focus on pipeline diversification rather than focusing on specific pipeline. Also, to practice execution, this disciplined execution is very critical for any projects. Long-term partnership with local players as well is critical, especially if the local regulatory complexity is there. So maybe to sum it up, to focus on to shift the focus from opportunistic bidding project to a more value-driven bankable projects would help kind of minimize that risk for developers. So this would really withstand fluctuation and will ensure potentially sustainable growth in the long term.
Thank you for answering that, sir. Our next question is, in areas where the grid is frequently unstable or experiences regular outages, how do you recommend managing or designing on-grid solar systems to ensure reliability? Are there any specific solutions or technologies you suggest to handle frequent grid problems while still using an on-grid setup?
I can take up this question, Ala. Yeah, so thanks for the question. So yeah, one of the things that I mean, of course, the solar powered microgrids or on grid projects also face is about the discontinuity, and then solar. So the best complement and solar and storage can go as a package in terms of how you design it. And the task of the battery in this purpose would be to actually ensure that there is the normal power consumption of the system loads when the amount of solar radiation is insufficient. So for any important loads, like when you have to count the cloudy days or rainy days or icy days when the solar radiation is not very it's not very robust, so on those days you can actually take you can actually calculate the battery capacity that would be needed, and then it can be used as solar. And also on tangentially for the PV inverters or grid forming batteries also is one of the technologies that could be considered. Especially grid forming batteries would be helpful in having their own voltage references, and while designing this can also make sure that you have I mean, even though if there is a blackout or a grid a grid failure that's happening in your area, you can still have backup power from solar plus battery.
Thank you so much for answering that, ma'am. We have a couple more questions now. What is the maximum lending term for developing a renewable energy project intended for the retail electricity supply market or the wholesale electricity spot market?
I think maybe other panelists will give a better answer to this one, but I think it would depend on basically the credit of the developers, because I think the question is about the renewable energy project for the retail supplier or to WESM, right? So as we discussed previously, the revenue stream will be quite volatile when it's about the WESM market, or if the off-taker is the retailer, still you don't actually see a long-term, fixed price contract as we see in the JAP, which means that it's going to be predominantly corporate finance, balance sheet finance, rather than the project finance, right? So I think it's up to the corporates, and I believe it's pretty much the large maybe players who will be able to fund the project itself. I think that would be the main lending term for these kind of projects.
Thank you for answering that,
I
Mr. Win.
can,
Yes, sir.
Great. Yeah. I'll probably chime in a bit as well. Just opining on what Vince's comment is. The lending term for different market is actually quite different. I would say Philippines as part of the ASEAN sort of region, it's a very different finance market compared to, let's say, Europe or also US. Say, for example, lenders in Australia, they can take on merchant risk, right? And the reason they can take on merchant risk is because you're not getting 20 years offtakes anymore, right? In Australia, you're not even getting 15 years offtake in Australia, right? Because the market has been so mature, the offtakes now, if you're lucky, you'll probably get 10 years offtake, right? Which basically forces, sponsors and lenders to basically take a view on merchant market, right? So it just goes to show different market is very different. Whereas, say, for example, in the Philippines, the maximum lending term that you can get really depends on the credibility of your offtake. So whether it's actually investment grade, sub-investment grade. B, the tenor of your offtake, right? So are you getting a 10 years offtake, 15 years offtake, or a 20 years offtake? The longer the offtake is, the more favorable the lending, the financing terms will be, right? And typically in the Philippines, what we've actually seen is lenders, I would say probably, if you're getting a 20 years, offtake, you can probably get, a little shy or even close to 20 years tenor for the debt amortization, right? And then obviously there's all the other factors such as, DSCR, debt service ratio coverage, DSRA, which is debt service, maintenance, and et cetera, et cetera. So I guess the key for lending for renewables is the offtake, right? And obviously, it also comes down to whether you're using tier one bankable equipment, which is proven technology. Because as you appreciate, financiers and banks, they're not basically technology experts, right? They're basically technology agnostic. So you really have to prove to them that the project that you're actually putting up has been demonstrated not only elsewhere in the world but also in the local market context. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. We have our last question now. What's your outlook on the residential solar market in the Philippines? Are there any emerging trends or any blockers you are encountering?
I'll answer this question because it's very close to my advocacy in terms of solar. Uh, it kind of hurts me to say that the residential market in Philippines is growing, but very slowly. There's strong interest, and that's obvious. You know, you're paying very high electricity bills, I'm sure, monthly that you see. But from a normal family, it remains limited because of the high upfront cost still. There's also kind of limited financing options that helps families to invest. The burden in net metering is still true, and it's I think that really needs to be revisited. So to scale is very difficult given the limitations, and I may be able to compare it with markets like Thailand where residential adoption is supported by tax incentives. There's simplified permitting in terms of residential installation. Comparing it to Philippines, we lag behind due to lack of consumer side incentives, I have to say. Um, I think in the Philippines there really needs to be a revisit in terms of the policies pertaining to incentivizing residential installation. Policies in other markets like Thailand, like the personal income tax rebates for solar installation, the VAT exemption for certain areas where residential electricity is very much needed, and a very simplified net metering procedure in countries like Thailand. I mean, in Thailand, if you have a house, you could apply for net metering, and within a week, you could probably start installing right away. That way is behind compared to what you would experience in Philippines. It's almost like building another new house just to get a net metering permit. I know it kind of improved over the past few years, but those things kind of creates burden in terms of ramping up installation in terms of residential solar system in the Philippines.
Thank you. Would anyone else from the panel like to chime in on that? All right. So with that, we've come to the close of our questions from the audience. And just before we conclude today's webinar, I'm delighted to share with you the details of our flagship event, the third edition of the Solar Week Philippines. So mark your calendars. The Solar Week Philippines 2025 will take place on September 18th at the Sheraton Manila Bay, Philippines. So this premier gathering will bring together policymakers, developers, EPCs, technology providers, investors, and key stakeholders to explore the future of solar and renewable energy in Philippines through high-impact panels, networking sessions, and knowledge-sharing opportunities. We look forward to your enthusiastic participation and presence at the main event. For more exciting updates about the event, do follow us on our official LinkedIn Solar Quarter Southeast Asia page. And with that, we officially conclude today's webinar. A heartfelt thank you to our esteemed speakers and panelists and our moderator, attendees as well, for your active participation. We look forward to bringing you more knowledge-driven sessions in the future. And until then, stay safe, stay inspired, and keep leading the change toward a greener tomorrow. Thank you once again, and have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.